Darrell Bradford, the executive vice president of 50 Can. That's a nationally supported education advocacy org. And the man has some 14 years working experience in education reform, policy, and advocacy. So Darrell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and there's so much going on, and that has been going on all year long in terms of COVID-19, and then now we have these nationwide protests. But kind of just stepping back to the time when we had essentially a pandemic that was the most pressing thing before us, there was nationwide closures of nearly 125,000 schools, impacting some 55 million students. That's instructional time, college readiness. But as I understand it, Black students suffer the most. Can you expound upon that?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to tell people, or sort of start when I get into these conversations about distance learning and what happened when the districts and schools of all types, public, private, charter, all shut down as a result of the crisis, is that COVID shines a spotlight on every inequity in our society. And so if it's the fact that, Black folks, low-income folks, or people of color work disproportionately in the service industry, or might live in multi-generational households with old people, young people all coming in and in a high contact way, and that was part of the reason why those communities were hardest hit by the virus. You just got to add all that up and consider it as well. But when the districts closed down, very few of them actually had real plans to teach online. And there are lots of reasons for that. One of them was that lots of districts hadn't invested a ton in technology. Some did, some didn't. And that broke down along economic lines. Like rich districts had it and lots of poor districts did not. Lots of like New York City really did a very slapdash job of trying to train its teachers even to teach folks online, right? And then there's the whole challenge of internet connectivity and devices. Like, yeah, everybody may have a cell phone, but not everybody has stable Wi-Fi at home. Even if you have Wi-Fi, it's nicer to have a computer than just a handheld. Sometimes if there are a lot of kids in the house, there's only one computer. Everybody can't be on it at the same time. And so when you add all that up, you sort of have a perfect storm that winds up hitting low-income kids hardest, and that's what's happened. The one thing I do want to say, some of the data that's come out about this that's really important is that low-income families spend just as much time trying to get their kids educated online as rich families do. And so despite the disparities in some of the results we've seen, and we can talk about it some more, I find it heartening that in the middle of the crisis, the idea that Black families don't care about their kids is being dispelled by Black families. And I think that's a very important takeaway.
Yes, Darrell, I'm really glad you raised that point, because there is a lot of ignorance out there in thinking that Black people are not as invested in their children's education. And we know that not to be true. And recently you wrote an article for the 74. It was titled Black Lives Matter and Black Education Matters Because Freedom Matters. And in that article, you said, we can't have an all education matters approach to the challenges of Black education. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to get over the target of being able to describe that way. So, I say this in the article too. I've been Black my whole life. I got a Black life. It's real important to me, right? It matters a lot to me. Black, like if 10 people are standing on a street corner and one person gets hurt, that's the person you give the Band-Aid to, right? It's not an insult to not give a Band-Aid to 9 people who aren't hurt, right? And Black Lives Matter activists, I think, have really cut to the core of the fact that if the least of among you, right, if the most put upon among you are not safe, then no one is safe.
Exactly.
Right. And so our American public education system is designed for everybody. And it has historically been designed for an everybody that's not African Americans. We're the only people in the history of this nation who have been denied freedom and education through public policy. Like not because not through scarcity, because it was a matter of law that could not happen. And if you take that history and you add it up, how can you take the solutions of a leafy, Iowa suburb and drop them down in Bed-Stuy? You just can't do it, and it has occurred to me. It occurs to me and a lot of people that Black folks, we need our own thing. We need something different that is just about us. We need a Black education matters solution that respects our history and our fears and our hopes and our dreams in a way that the current system just doesn't do.
Absolutely. And the fact that, we're kind of in a situation where we spend a fair amount of our time in public spaces in fear because of the Amy Coopers of the world, the white woman in Central Park who called the police on the Black man, or because of the police. So the thought that we could sit in educational institutions and learn the same is not necessarily the case. And I also wanted to hit on another similar point. We have Education Week saying that American public schools are going to need $70 billion for the next 3 years in terms of federal stimulus. And then at the same time, we have this movement pushing to defund the police, as in, don't give the police so much of your budget. So what kind of parallels do you really see between the education and the criminal justice system?
Oh, what a good question. You look like you do this for a living. So the police, right, as a workforce, they mirror teachers as a workforce. And I want to be careful about this because in both places, right, there are people who want the best for everyone. And in both places, there's like a small percentage of people who should be doing something else, right? And in the police force, the person who should be doing something else, if they are empowered and protected, they can end your life. And in schools, the person who's in charge of teaching you, if they aren't particularly good at it and are empowered and protected, they can make sure you never become the person you're meant to be. And so that's not an attack on either institution. It's just a sort of a realization of the thing. But I have found it interesting that people are saying for the police, government can't do this. Turn it all over to civil society. And it's like, well, I might be in the middle of that, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that we could turn over to civil society, but the police protect our freedoms. Like, how do we do that better? And then on the other side, for education, people are like, the government is the only entity that can do this. And I'm like, I don't know how that works. Like if over here the church and the local grandma and the Kiwanis Club or whatever, right, have a role to play. Over here, those institutions probably have a role to play too, and it's local and it's contextual. So it's been interesting to see the same arguments emerge in reverse depending on what the issue is. I guess I would just say that, like, given where Black Lives Matter is in particular, this, like, I'm happy to see the discussion is at that place where somebody wants to do something. Like the president, for all his flaws, like, he signed an executive order today. Like 4 years ago, we would have been like, what? Like, is that ever going to happen? So there has been progress. I'm heartened by that against this dangerous backdrop we live in.
Oh, absolutely. And also just the fact of the administration in which we live and kind of the pressures that are put on the educational system to continue to function without the needs that it essentially needs.
Well, and can I say one thing? Yeah. So the number you cited, 75 billion was the ask for what's called CARES. So, like, I know your listeners are astute. So the last stimulus package. Folks are talking 250 now, 250 billion. Like, on the one hand, I always sort of joke about this because the letter that the big city school superintendent signed about this was basically like, we know it's a lot of money, so we'll take it in installments, But on the other side of it, this is the only time that the federal government has ever shut down both the economy and schools of all types. And so they are implicated in some of these revenue shortfalls. And even I've argued that, like, look, more money for all schools. Like, you can't expect people to deal with all the problems of reintegrating kids back in school, maybe having to be some kids at home, some kids in school, some teachers retiring, cleaning buildings, whatever, with the same price tag. That doesn't seem right to me.
All right, Darrell. Well, you provided some incredible insight, but one question I definitely have for you, and I want to make sure you get this in, because, there are a lot of issues that are pouring out in our feeds and in our world right now. But what is the one thing about education that you think isn't getting kind of the uplifting, the notice, eyes on it that we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, right now there are schools that are beating the odds, and I think that's the important thing. And we actually knew where they were in states all across America and cities all across America who were helping all kids, and in particular low-income kids of color, become the best version of themselves, go on to college, change the world, and get justice for George Floyd. And I think when we have some sanity about our lives again, we should look at what is there because it's there already, and we should change public policy so there can be more of it.
All right. Well, this is Darrell Bradford. And Darrell, can you please tell us where can people find you on social media?
So I'm at Dyrnwyn, DYRNWYN, because I'm a huge nerd, on Twitter. And you can find me talking about education and soccer there at any time.
Fantastic. And I will be sharing that article you wrote. That's very powerful. Thank you again, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.